10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, wrestling fans, and welcome to the Wrestle Talk Podcast. For the next 2 hours, we will bring you the latest pro wrestling news, in-depth analysis of all your favorite promotions from across the globe, and much, much more. We will also bring you exclusive interviews with the greatest professional wrestling personalities on the local, national, and international levels. If you want to follow the Wrestle Talk Podcast, check us out online at www.wrestletalkpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And now, it's time for the reigning, defending, undisputed leader in pro wrestling podcast, the Wrestle Talk Podcast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's installment of the Wrestle Talk Podcast right here on all of your great social media outlets. It is I, the one, the only, Luke Skywalker Robertson here tonight. We're going to have a great show. We're going to be joined in the 8 o'clock hour by Wes Rhea. He is the author of the book Off the Top Rope. We're going to be talking all things professional wrestling, and we're going to be adding a little bit of extra insight here and there as we not only have a great episode here tonight, but also as we are on the road, not only to WrestleMania 41, but also to Universe Mania, which is going to be taking place here in the weeks to come. Now, speaking of which, as you know, each and every week here at the Wrestle Talk Podcast, I am not going to be doing this broadcast alone. I'm going to go ahead and throw things out to my broadcast colleague, a man who's been all around the professional wrestling world, a man who's been like a brother to me, a man who has been the voice of Pro Wrestling Epic. I'm talking about the one, the only, the maestro, Jeremy Karp. Jeremy, how are you doing this evening, my friend?
Luke, I have missed you so much, my friend. You absolutely are like a brother to me, and I wouldn't be where I'm at in my wrestling career or career in general without you. So thank you so much. It is so great to be back hosting alongside you the Wrestle Talk Podcast.
But you know something, Jeremy, again, this is one of those things we sit down and we look at this. Jeremy and I have been behind the broadcast microphones for a number of years. I mean, again, making his debut behind the microphone at Dynamo Pro Wrestling, moving on to Pro Wrestling Epic. And not only that, too, you have Roundabout Sports, I mean, the Interstate 70 Sports Media Network. Again, longtime contributor to the Wrestle Talk Podcast. And tonight's going to be a great program. You know, that's one thing I really love about the Wrestle Talk Podcast. It's just the wide variety of people that we've had on the program. And tonight we're going to have another great author, that being Wes Rhea. And I got to tell you right now, looking at some of the things that are here, I mean, just to give you an idea, I want to give a quote, just a little teaser, if you will, for our fans here for tonight's program. Do people not see your dream, your vision? Fortunately for you, there's only one person that needs to see that vision, and that's you. Read this book, and my good buddy Wes can help you see that vision or that version through his experience and achievements. That is from multi-time WCW heavyweight champion and WWE Hall of Famer, among other things, the one, the only DDP himself, Diamond Dallas Page. If you have an opportunity to have somebody give that kind of a quote, that kind of an endorsement, you know it's somebody that you want to listen to, and you want to be here tonight for the Wrestle Talk Podcast.
The DDP stamp of approval, Luke? Come on. That, to me, that's one of the biggest honors a guy could have.
That is true, Jeremy. That is very true. And like I said, we've had a lot of great things. You know, matter of fact, I do want to take just a minute here before we go to our sponsors. I do know that you were very busy this week. I know that there is now a new King of Granite City that took place this past weekend. I want to give a shout out to longtime friend of yours, also a longtime friend of mine, Matt Fitchett, now known as the King of Granite City, with his victory this past weekend as a part of Pro Wrestling Epic's Wrestling at the Mill. Again, a lot of great things going on here as we go to WrestleMania 41 and Universe Mania. But before we do, Jeremy, I want to go ahead and take just a minute here and remind all of our great viewers of the sponsors without who each and every week the Wrestle Talk Podcast does not exist. Well, you seem so excited, Jeremy.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
All right, look, the Wrestle Talk Podcast would like to thank all the amazing sponsors. That's right, you all out there. Retro Zone, Painter's Dream Productions, of course. The Independent St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame, which this fine gentleman will be an inductee of in just a couple months. Good old Skywalker. Little Popeye Designs. You can get yourself a beautiful Wrestle Talk Podcast tumbler for just $20. And, of course, the premier fantasy wrestling group, and the one I know that's the biggest around, the one and only FWWC.
Jeremy, you got it all taken care of there. And as a reminder, hashtag Let's Talk Wrestling, hashtag WTP, hashtag Wrestle Talk Podcast, hashtag Universe Mania, hashtag FWWC, hashtag Interstate 70 Sports Media, hashtag Retro Zone, hashtag Painter's Dream Production. And we can add any kind of hashtag we want. Hashtag Off the Top Rope, hashtag Wes Rhea. Who knows? We might even have a lot more people stopping by tonight. But, Jeremy, as we talk about each and every week, I mean, again, we're getting close to that time of year again. WrestleMania time, tax time. For those that are watching us, I know a lot of people are getting ready for final exams, for tests all over the place. I mean, again, this is a very big time of year. But, you know, there's one thing that we always do each and every time that we take to the airwaves. And, Maestro, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you here because – you do this introduction oh so well, and I want to go ahead and make sure that you get it taken care of in a proper way to get episode 512 rolling, as only the Maestro and the Skywalker himself can do each and every show.
All right, folks, this is the very special and maybe a little acrimonious time of the show where I kindly ask everybody, if you are wearing a cap, to please remove it. Place your hand and or cap over your heart as we salute the greatest country in the world. And that is, of course, America, damn it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again.
I am convinced that the ABC executives listened to that rendition again, and that's the real reason she got kicked off the Connors.
Well, you know something, Jeremy, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something you did, if it's something that our board operator has taken care of. I'm going to tell you right now, it seems like each and every time we play that, and again, we want to give a shout out to all of our wonderful men and women who defend our country each and every week, as well as our first responders, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, all of those who make it a point to step up each and every day so that we can do such great things as the Wrestle Talk Podcast each and every episode that we have. And you know something, Jeremy? I got something I want to throw out here, and we're gonna talk about high spots here in a couple minutes. But you know, and I think he's backstage. But I want to start this episode off talking about a man who has done a lot in the world of the FWWC, a man who's done a lot, who I really truly consider to be a great friend, and I've known him for many, many years. And let's go ahead here, and I think he's backstage. If he is, let's go ahead and bring him up on the screen, because I want to see his face when I do a formal introduction of this man. So let's go ahead here and see if he's there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, everyone that's a part of the Wrestle Talk Podcast family, it is my esteemed honor and privilege to present to you a man who is known across the FWWC as one of the keynote individuals. He is a man who wears suit and tie every day. He makes the big decisions. He's the one that gets the big check, and he's the one with the corner office. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the man who owes me barbecue at the Hall of Fame in June, the one and only, the CEO, DeJuan Mills. DeJuan, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
So let me ask you a question, Skywalker. Would you like restaurant barbecue or Mr. CEO's barbecue?
Ooh. Mm.
You don't have to decide now. Think about it. Let me know before you do, because I won't get the Hall of Fame. Straight up.
Ooh, that sounds quite, that could be quite the challenge. And you know something, CEO? Talking about things here, talking about great challenges. I got to tell you, looking at things right now, going into Universe Mania, there are going to be a lot of challenges along the way. And if you think about it here, they were talked about it, made a big deal last night. It's only 19 days to WrestleMania 41. That means, as you know, the Universe Mania is around the corner, and this is by far the premier FWWC event. And to get a coveted spot at Universe Mania, that means that you're at the top. You're at the very tippy top of the FWWC. And I know you got some information to share with the viewers of the Wrestle Talk podcast tonight, as we basically are in the home stretch to Universe Mania and the FWWC. So, Mr. CEO, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, my friend.
Yes, sir. Universe Mania 11, to be specific. Now, a lot of people understand, when it comes to fantasy wrestling, e-feds of that nature, they come few and far in between. This particular fantasy wrestling group has been around since 2011. Let's think about that. 2011. My daughter was 1. We are 14 years deep into this fantasy wrestling group. We officially started competition in the year of 2015. Universe Mania 1 was in 2014. You do the freaking math. We are on Universe Mania 11. And to have that collective of people in a fantasy wrestling group, in the EFED, if you will, to have people show up to 11 straight Universe Mania big events, that's a big deal. We've had this event at bars. We've had this event in houses. We've had this event at venues. But the one thing that stands tall amongst all the other, speculations and words and whatnot is the fact that we are the premier fantasy wrestling group in the world, the FWWC, the Fantasy Wrestling Worldwide Chapter. And I would like to thank in advance everybody that's making this event possible. But before you get to Universe Mania, there's something you got to go through. We've had our matches, we had our qualification matches, but going into Universe Mania 11, there are certain stipulations, if you will. Now, I talked about this a couple weeks ago. The champs and the challengers have the opportunity to name their stipulation for the particular match at Universe Mania 11. But in order to achieve that, the opponents have to go through a series of matches. 2 nights, April 7th and April 14th. Someone can bring the graphics up. I can give that information here real quick and real nice. Plus, I got chicken cooking upstairs. I'm frying the chicken, not the chicken, but you know what I'm saying. Meal still cooks. I cook. Meals cook. I don't cook like Cena last night. Hopefully we can talk about that. But I still get my cook on. So, whoever got them graphics, man, whoever got them posters, bring them bad boys up. We can get into it. And I know I sent it to Skywalker, and I know I sent it to none other than Hardcore Hall. So somebody got it somewhere.
Well, right now, we're going to go ahead and get those pulled up here, CEO. I know that they're getting them loaded as we speak. And I had an opportunity to look at these just a little while ago. And I got to tell you, there is a great amount of information that's going to be brought forward. And I do believe that we're just about ready to get those loaded up here. Stand by here just a moment. Again, you're talking about how, and I want to go ahead as we're getting ready to throw this graphic up here. You talk about the matches that are going to be taking place on the 7th and the 14th. Again, that's not going to give a lot of people time to slow down. Again, the 14th, and then you got Universe Mania, I believe it's on April 19th or 19th and 20th as a part of the event. So, that's not going to give a lot of people any time to really prepare. You're going to have 6 days, and there you are. You're at Universe Mania, And I mean, again, you're going to be in a situation where you may get dropped into a slot. I mean, you don't know the stipulation. You don't know hardly anything. And you got to go in for that chance at the gold.
And it's one of our biggest events, man. Like I said, it's one of the, it started off, at Universe Mania 1. Now, we didn't have any matches at Universe Mania 1. Technically, Universe Mania 1 was, I want to say, technically WrestleMania 31. So there were no, Universe Mania 1 was, yeah, you're right. It was no matches, nothing of that nature. We were just hanging out, having a good time. But I'm telling you guys, getting to 11 of these, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of, involvement. It takes a lot of graphic design. It takes a lot of conversation. And on top of that, it takes a lot of dedication. Now, this is for the 14th. We can go backwards. It is what it is. But for the 14th, the stipulation matches are as follows. Remy Ricks, who will be going for the FWWC Spartan Star Championship against none other than Ace, has to go against Marcus Mayhem, my Universe Mania 11 opponent. Bishop, who will be going for the FWC World Heavyweight Championship, has to go against Dark Horse, who is our current FWC Hardcore Champion. And Daniel Graham, who will be competing for the FWC Warriors Heart Championship, will be going against Ace, who is our current FWC Spartan Star Champion. The opponents, the challengers, have to win those matches straight up. No ties. Now, let's talk about the 7th. There's a familiar name on there. Look who's on there. It's me. I'll be damned. My main event debut match. Look at this. Rage, who will be going for the FWC International title, has to fight me, this guy, on the main roster. Hey, yeah, I finally made it. I've been in the group for 14 years. I'm finally on the main roster. Ain't that a bitch? Jason Curtis, who will be going for the FWC Hardcore Championship, will go against our FWC International Champion, Badass American Diva. And last but not least, High Society, that consists of Remy Ricks and Ace, will be going against our FWC World Heavyweight Champion, Moby Lee, and our Warriors Heart Champion, Gabriel R. Singh. Yes, so it's going to be on. If the opponents can win these matches, they will be able to pick their stipulation. There can be no ties, nothing of that nature. They have to win. If not, then the champions get to pick the stipulation. And I'm just going to speak for myself. Like I said, I'll say it again. I have no dog in this fight. I know my Universe Mania 11 opponent, but I'm going to do what Hardcore Sis asked me to do, and me and Ray is going to get down, baby. So that is all I have for now as it relates to FWC information. A couple weeks from now, we will talk about the official FWC Universe Mania 11 card, which is still kind of in the works, but it's going to be badass.
Well, very, very true, CEO. I mean, again, when you're getting the opportunity to be a part of Universe Mania 11, and I got to tell you right now, I've had the opportunity to be at a few events of the FWWC and have the opportunity to be at those events. I mean, I remember one in Kansas City, and again, it was a good time. I mean, having all the members of the FWWC there and seeing how things go and how things work out really is a unique experience. And again, to be around since 2014, I mean, that's a huge to do. And again, a big shout out to the FWWC for being around as long as it is. Now, CEO, you're here, and I'm going to tell you right now, I know that our broadcast colleague here, the Maestro, is on the screen with us, and usually we go ahead and we're going to jump right into high spots. I want to go ahead and hit the music for the high spot segment, but I am going to go ahead and I'm going to breach protocol here a little bit tonight. There is one question that's really on my mind, and I want to get you gentlemen's opinion. So let's go ahead. If we can, let's go ahead and hit that intro music for the high spot segment on the Wrestle Talk Podcast.
Mic check. Yeah. All right. Wrestle Talk Podcast. DJ Money. Yeah. Let's go. Welcome to High Spots, where we pop news like flare chops. We talk shop, coming through the screens of a laptop, and non-stop like a running speakers of blacktop. We hit hard like chair shots and backdrops, like a clock flash, look like a belly flop. Now that's hard. We up to speed while they stay slow. Wrestle Talk Podcast, now they know we about to start the show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the intro to High Spots being brought to us by the one, the only DJ Money. Make it a point to check out Bryant Hill, a great line of personal care products. Make it a point to check them out online. They got a lot of great stuff, and I know they are making huge waves in the world. Also, if you're in the great pardon me, if you're in the Georgia area, make it a point to stop on by and pick up some items personally. Tell our good friend DJ Money at the Wrestle Talk Podcast sent you. Now, gentlemen, as I said, I'm going to breach protocol here a minute. I do have one question I want to throw out here before we even hit the randomizer. And this is one that's kind of on my mind, but I want to get your opinions. And if we can go ahead and throw up the graphic, as many of you know, last night, Gunther took on Jimmy Uso. And as you see here, this graphic is really about the only one we can share. And if we can go ahead and have the question pop across the bottom of the screen, the question is, was the violent assault on Jimmy Uso last night needed to further Jey Uso versus Gunther? And gentlemen, I'm just going to throw it out here. We have three completely different points of view. And CEO, I want to throw this at you first. This has definitely been a really contested rivalry between these two gentlemen. But I got to ask you, was last night too much?
When it comes to professional wrestling, I'm going to far off the topic. Like I tell my 14-year-old daughter all the time, because she's just now getting into wrestling. Aside from the action, everything that happens in that ring tells a story. Every promo, every screenshot, everything that happens from the time that program starts to the time that program ends is telling a story. Now, with what happened last night between Jimmy and Gunther, and I thought it was kind of odd that Jay was tied with, what was it, zip ties instead of handcuffs. I'm like, shit, he could have broke out or cut that with scissors. I don't know. Anyway, little things I noticed. I do not think it was too much. Unfortunately, I think the tale of the tape is already written when it comes to Jay versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania. Here's why. I don't know what happened. And wrestling can be so finicky like this. In the beginning of the feud, it was Jay, main event, World Heavyweight title, WrestleMania, main event, Jay, main event, Jay, main event, Jay. And then something happened, like it always does in wrestling. Now, all of a sudden, it's no longer the main event. Hell, we don't even know what's going to be on the card, but we know it's not going to be the main event. So, I understand what they're trying to do. You know, they're trying to put eyes on the match, but considering the fact that you've already taken this match out of the main event conversation, and the fact that the triple threat match between Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins is going to be the main event for night one, I believe. I'm sorry. It kind of killed the momentum the match had. And I appreciate the fact that they're trying to do things, and I appreciate the fact that they're trying to, do their best to either salvage or bring attention to this match. But shit, you've already written the tale. It is no longer the World Heavyweight Championship match. Main event Jey Uso. Main effing event Jey Uso is not main eventing at WrestleMania. It makes no sense. And yes, I appreciate the fact that, Gunther and Jay have been on TV. Let me give shout out to that, credit to that. They've been on TV every single week. There's been something happening with those two guys every single week. His brother has got involved. It's amazing. But the momentum is still, it's like the air has been taken out of it because it is no longer the main event. The World Heavyweight title is no longer the main event. Now, granted, in WrestleMania's past, hell, the World Heavyweight title was one of the first matches. I'll go back to Sheamus versus Daniel Bryan in the 15-second match when he got kicked in the freaking face, the kiss of death by AJ Lee. That was at the beginning of the match, but what happened at the end of that WrestleMania? It was Rock versus Cena. So that was something that was equally built. So I don't know. I like what they're trying to do, but I think the wins have already been taken out of the match. That's just my opinion.
Well, CEO, I want to throw this one at you. I mean, again, we know full well that Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, CM Punk, that is going to be a main event. Now, I want to throw these little carrots out there at you. We already know right now that one night of WrestleMania has been spoken for. Now the question is this. Do we have, and again, I'm throwing them all out there because they're all still confirmed matchups. Do we have Tiffany Stratton versus Charlotte Flair? Do we have the three-way between Rhea, Bianca, and Io? Do you have the matchup between John Cena and Cody Rhodes? Or do you have main event Jey Uso and Gunther? Now, like you said, with having this matchup basically being given one of those two coveted WrestleMania main event spots now, I mean, again, that's going to be one of those where, I mean, how do you, it's almost like, to me, whichever night gets that matchup, whether it's night one or night two, you basically have taken away not just from Gunther and Jey Uso. I think you've taken away from everybody who's in the championship picture. And that's kind of a tough thing to go with. Now, I want to go ahead here and throw this over to our broadcast colleague. Now, Maestro, I know you've got a lot on your mind as it relates to this matchup and what's going on. And I mean, again, you've been very active as of late. You, between Roundabout Sports and all the other projects that you've been a part of, you've seen a lot of things. But this past Monday night, the matchup between Jimmy Uso and Gunther, have they somehow managed to cross the line? And that's what I'm asking to you. What are your thoughts about Jey Uso and Gunther after the events of last night?
I mean, look, to me, when you have Cena, the whole thing with Jimmy Uso and Gunther started to fall after Cena turned heel. Because then what ends up happening is Cena's story becomes the biggest story. And Gunther versus Jey Uso, which to me will still be a great match, suddenly takes a back seat to the whole thing of WrestleMania. And what's interesting is, I want to put this out there, folks. Winning the Royal Rumble guarantees you a future world title shot. It doesn't guarantee you the main event. Keep that in mind. AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura didn't main event WrestleMania. So I don't even think it's a big deal that Jey Uso isn't main event. Yeah, I get it with the whole main event Jey Uso, but this is just part of his rise. You know, Gunther and Jey Uso are two of the best in the business. And as far as yesterday, or as far as last night, whatever, with Jimmy Uso taking on Gunther and the bloody, violent aftermath and everything, you know, it said, the question says, was it needed to further the story? I actually think it was, because it makes it personal. Think about when Roman Reigns took on Jey Uso in Hell in a Cell, how that was needed to further the bloodline storyline that was forming at that time. He needed to absolutely destroy Jey, even when Jimmy didn't want him to. Well, here's Gunther. He had no reason to destroy Jimmy Uso except to fuel the fire more. And that's exactly what he did. So it advances the story because obviously, I mean, it just makes you, especially if you're, you know, a young wrestling fan, despise everything Gunther is and stands for. But it makes you really rally for Jey Uso, because Jimmy Uso was in the backwind all this time. Now he finally comes back into the picture, and look what happens. So I think it was needed. I think it was well done. And even though it's not going to main event WrestleMania, I still think it's going to be a great match between Gunther and Jey Uso. You know, and if anything, if that isn't main eventing WrestleMania, I like to think of it as a good problem to have. That just means you have a stacked roster and an amazing card in store for everybody, even for 2 nights.
Well, Maestro, I agree with you to a point. And here's one, and I'm a level with you. I'm going to pull that curtain back a little bit. Before we went on the air tonight, I had a conversation with my lovely wife, and my wife has been around me my entire career. She's known me since I was a sophomore in high school. I mean, we've been together, joined at the hip for many a year. And when I asked her about it, she really hadn't had a chance to get a complete understanding of what was there. And she, to a certain degree, agreed with what you were saying. But to me, and this sounds weird because, I mean, I love professional wrestling. I've loved it since I was a little kid. But last night, and the situation that took place between Gunther and Jimmy Uso, and I may take a lot of flack from the Wrestle Talk Podcast family for this one. I liken it to only one other situation. And it was one that I felt took it too far. And that was the Age of the Fall starting in Ring of Honor. For those that weren't familiar, if you ever have an opportunity, make it a point to go online, go to your YouTubes and pull it up. It was a matchup where the Briscoe brothers were wrestling. I believe it was Jay Briscoe, if I'm not mistaken, had suffered a pretty nasty gash in his head and got attacked by the Age of the Fall at the time, which was Necro Butcher, Lacey, Jimmy Jacobs, and I believe it was Tyler Black at the time. And it was the idea of where after Jay Briscoe had been attacked, they hooked him by his feet, lifted him up above the ring, and Jimmy Jacobs is doing the entire interview, the entire promo underneath Jay Briscoe, basically dripping blood down onto him. And the idea was, and again, this is kind of where I think it went a little too far. In the case of Jimmy Jacobs actually basically opened his mouth while Jay Briscoe was bleeding. And at one point last night, I think in this day and age, that Gunther took it a little too far. I mean, again, he looked like he had been through a war with Jimmy Uso. But the idea was, did he have to basically, I get the idea of a beatdown. I get it. But at the end of the day, do you need to basically more or less bathe in somebody's blood to get the point across? I mean, I understand that, yeah, blood is a part of professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is a contact sport. I know a lot of people say sports entertainment, but no. When it comes down to it, there is bloodshed in wrestling. It's some people say it's choreographed. It happens. Sometimes it just happens in the course of a matchup. But I think Gunther took it just a little too far last night. Do I think it's great for the story as far as what they were trying to tell? Yeah, but I think he took it just a little too far for my taste. And Maestro, I agree with you completely. I think this is a really great thing to have a stacked card to where you're looking at it. I mean, if you put those 4 title matches and you put Rollins versus Punk versus Reigns, and I believe there's a couple other matches that are still yet to be announced. I mean, that right there is going to be a dynamite WrestleMania. And I think that while it was necessary, and again, like you were saying, CEO, the idea of being zip tied to the rope and you're just fingertips away from being able to save your brother, and you can't do it.
Yeah.
I agree with it, but I think
it kind of another one quickly. I have to throw this one out because this is the thing. This is what I love about wrestling. Wrestling doesn't even have to have bloodshed for it to go too far when it comes to a story. Because I'm going to tell you, to me, when I think of things that go too, when it comes to like a story that went too far, I'm going to tell you, I mean, I've been watching wrestling for almost 20 years. I want to say that 2009 might have been one of the most like brutal years, which is funny because that's kind of the start of the PG era. But Randy Orton was a straight menace. And when Randy Orton had Triple H handcuffed to the ring ropes right at the turnbuckle, DDT'd Stephanie McMahon and then kissed her, how is that not going too far?
Not to cut you off, that was in Kansas City at the Sprint Center. I was there for that. I'll let you continue.
So, CEO, you've seen it personally. How does, and look, no bloodshed, no nothing. But to kiss a man's wife in front of him, so after knocking her out, you can't get much more sinister than that. And that's what led to Triple H breaking into Orton's house and throwing him out the window and beating the hell out of him. So I think the reason I say that the thing about Jimmy Uso is not going too far is because wrestling has shown us, and that's just one of plenty of examples we could throw out tonight, of instances where you don't need weapons or bloodshed to exactly take a story too personal or too far. And let's face it, anything that somehow ties into the McMahons usually ends up going too far. I'm just gonna say that right now. Like we witnessed Do-Rag McMahon. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
God. Well, I'll throw one out there before I gotta get out of here because dinner will be.
All right, I want to hear this.
So, back in I'm a little bit older than I'll be 40 in a month. Hallelujah. Thank you. I got into wrestling about maybe age 11, 10, something of that nature. So, back then kayfabe was still real. But if you recall the Brian Pillman, Stone Cold, Brian Pillman's laid up in the on his couch.
Yep.
Cold's breaking in his couch. Now, at age 11, okay? At age 11, obviously not now. And if you go to YouTube, you'll see the behind the scenes. Look it up. It's pretty funny as hell. Number one, the gun wasn't even loaded. There wasn't any clip in the damn thing. But still, the USA executives had a effing fit because there's a gun on television. This is like 96, maybe borderline 97, okay? And they were like, this is too far. This is too much. And these kids are like, I'm a kid too. I'm like, what in the mother F is going on? Oh my God, Stone Cold's getting shot. Some shit. So yeah, when you say you don't need blood, when you don't say, but again, storytelling at its best. Wrestling from the time it comes on to the end, from curtain to curtain, from bell to bell, tells a story.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
there
again,
is one. And like I know because you unlocked the memory with Brian Pillman. I just got to say, there's storyline things that go too far, and then there's the real life things that go too far, like Melanie Pillman being interviewed the day after Brian died. Whoa. Once again, like I said, too far. Okay, I'm done. I had to just say that.
Well, right now, guys, we could be talking about these for the entire episode, and probably for 2 or 3 more episodes. But you know something? Real quick here, before we let you go, CEO, for those that want more information about the FWWC, where can they get more information about joining the Fantasy Wrestling Worldwide chapter?
Yeah, everywhere. Fantasy Wrestling Worldwide chapter on Facebook, Fantasy Wrestling Worldwide chapter, FWC on Twitter. We even got ourselves a nice YouTube channel. And we're working on some other things, but primarily Facebook. X, my bad. X, see, I'm old. X, I'm sorry, it's not Twitter. My bad. Look here, I'll be 40 in a month. I'm old.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the CEO, Dewan Mills. Dewan, thank you for joining us here tonight and providing your expert commentary. And we look forward to seeing you real soon back here on the Wrestle Talk podcast. And you know something, Maestro? We've got Wes Rhea, who's going to be joining us here in a little bit over a half hour. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg tonight when we're talking about pro wrestling. We talk about things going too far, and wrestling can go too far sometimes. But there's a lot of other news that we're going to talk about here. And what do you know? We don't even hit the randomizer, but this is a question in itself. Let's go ahead and throw the question up here because we've been talking about how far is too far. Let's go ahead and throw the question up here on the screen. with Jon Moxley's most recent spot, do you think there's any place for this level of violence in pro wrestling?
Okay, let me just. Okay, I need to kind of. Okay, yes and no. There is the line, that line we're talking about. Okay, we don't need to see that on AEW. We don't need to see that in WWE. You want to watch that? Go to GCW or like really look at any type of death match, tournament of death. Hell, even go to Japan, and that's not even bashing the spot. It's just, to me, it's a tradition thing. If that makes any sense, it's something that's more notable. Like in Japan, the exploding barbed wire death match, things like that. You don't see that on Monday Night Raw. You don't see that on Dynamite. Well, they tried on Dynamite. We all know how the whole exploding thing worked. But nevertheless, I looked at that spot. That spot was disgusting. Okay, what happened with Jimmy Uso? Oh, he's bleeding. Holy crap. Oh, my gosh. No, the thing with Jon Moxley was absolutely disgusting. The reason there was no need for it is because what does it advance? Jimmy Uso getting bloodied up by Gunther advances a story to a personal level. What does Jon Moxley getting a spiked bat with nails in his back against Adam Copeland do? It does nothing except short-term shock value. And you know what promotion was famous for trying short-term shock value? WCW. Short-term spots don't equal long-term solutions. That is why AEW lost $77 million last year, because of stupid things like that. Them thinking that these little shock spots that'll go viral on TikTok or Facebook or you are going to be the next big thing. No. Is there any place for this violence in pro wrestling? Probably not. But I know there's some promotions and some places, internationally and nationally, that do promote this type of violence. And more power to them. Because guess what? I've called death matches. I literally called an Akira versus Cash Borton death match where Ben Truss got thrown through a flaming table in the parking lot in Alton, Illinois. So I was this close, like as far as my screen is, that's how close I was to the whole thing. So it's nothing new to me. But the thing of it is, that spot did nothing but short-term shock value. And to me, there's no business for that happening, especially for AEW. But,
Well, Jeremy, I want to throw this out here, and it's just food for thought on a couple avenues.
Okay.
One is the idea of go back to the day, and you talk about the short-term shock value of a WCW. Yes. Look at an ECW. Double flaming tables, spots off the top of a cage, thumbtacks, barbed wire. I mean, again, remember hearing the stories about how Sabu wrestling a matchup tears his bicep to the bone and basically athletic tapes his bicep shut and continues the matchup.
Oh,
now,
gosh, that's freaky.
Those are the kinds of things that are there. I mean, to give you an idea too, I remember. I don't want to tell that story just yet, but I do want to talk about how you talk about things like Jon Moxley. And again, this wasn't just taking nails to the back. These things were embedded. He probably could have gone back out to where the Death Riders come out to the ring, coming out through the crowd. He probably could have gotten all the way to the locker room and still had that embedded in his back. I agree with you, but here's the thing, though. I think, and again, this might be a little bit out there, you do that as a part of a street fight match on an AEW pay-per-view, different story entirely. Because if you go back to the idea of things like, in no particular order, lights out matches between Joey Janela and it was Jon Moxley. When Joey Janela, for some reason or another, thought it was a good idea to take off his wrestling shoes and wound up taking an atomic drop feet first into the thumbtacks. Or the idea of seeing, I believe was it a Double or Nothing, or might actually been All In, where Darby Allin takes a coffin drop through a wooden cracker barrel on the steps, or Darby Allin taking the fall through the pane of glass, or Swerve Strickland having the hypodermic needles injected into his mouth. All those things, when you put them on a pay-per-view, tells a different story. But I think giving that to people on live TV, on regular network television, is also another one where I think you kind of overstep a line. A true story here, and again, pulling the curtain back a little bit here, talking about trips down memory lane. I remember I may have been 17, 18 years old at the time, maybe just a little bit older than that, and I was wrestling on an event in Union, Missouri. And the main event was two men in a barbed wire match. And now it's not like you would see in a lot of promotions today where the ropes would be wrapped in barbed wire. I do know, I remember one, and you always have said I was crazy, was on the Izzy Blackwell tribute show, where I was crazy enough to get inside the ring and announce the match between Mephisto and Madman Pondo inside a ring wrapped in barbed wire. And I remember that the referee wound up the manager wound up being the victim, and wound up because he got caught in the barbed wire somehow or another and got split pretty much from ear to ear. It's one of those things when you sit down and look at it, those kinds of things have their place. Are they my preferred cup of tea? No. But, I mean, again, I agree with you. I think that takes it to a level that we don't need on regular television. It doesn't matter if you have a PG-13 rating or whatever the case may be. When you start getting into things where you have large amounts of nails embedded in somebody's skin and muscle tissue, or you've got somebody who's wearing somebody's blood like war paint, I think both of those kind of draw a line for their own different reasons. So, like I said, great question here. And again, thank you to all of our viewers who've been sending the messages in here. We're trying to share them as much as we can. Again, we're going to be joined here in a little over 20 minutes by Wes Rhea here as a part of the Wrestle Talk podcast. Right now here, let's go ahead, now that we've gotten our two questions out the way and how they've all been kind of connected together, let's go ahead real quick, and let's go ahead and hit the randomizer for our next question here. Finally, we're going to get to use the randomizer here tonight on the Wrestle Talk podcast.
I'm traveling, so don't worry.
All right, let's go ahead and hit that randomizer. All right, let's see what the next graphic of the randomizer brings up this evening. Ooh, interesting question here. Let's go ahead and switch out. This is not about Jon Moxley. This is talking about Saraya. Some know her as Paige from the WWE. Let's go ahead here. Saraya has just announced her AEW departure. Does their women's division take a noticeable hit from this? And I know that the Maestro, I'm gonna go ahead and go first here, Maestro, as you're trying to get things taken care of. I'm gonna tell you right now, to me, I don't think they take a hit here.
I agree.
Because their talent pool is so deep right now in the women's division. I think right now when you have the likes of, and this is going to sound strange, like a Willow Nightingale, like a Jamie Hayter, like a Chris Statlander, like a Megan Bain, like a Mercedes Moné, like a Julia Hart, when you go down the list of people in AEW in the women's division, Saraya, and it sounds kind of crazy. I know there's been a lot of people on the media that have said that she may make a kind of a last run in the WWE. I'm going to tell you right now, to me, and I don't mean any disrespect because she's a phenomenal in-ring competitor, I almost say right now that I don't think AEW takes a hit. And I dare say it, I don't think the WWE even gives it an opportunity because their talent roster is so deep. Maestro, your thoughts? I mean, I think
doesn't need her. No, WWE doesn't need her, and AEW will be just fine without her. I think she is, at this point, I think the time off from the injury, her neck injury and everything, look, I'm glad she came back. But I think as far as wrestling and an in-ring career, I think as far as major promotions go, like AEW and WWE, I don't see it. I think it's over.
Well, Jeremy, I want to throw this one at you. I don't want to, and again, this is going to sound strange, but with all these current working arrangements, do you see, and this is going to sound strange, do you see somebody along the lines of an MLW or an Impact Wrestling or a CMLL or AAA? Do you see any of, or maybe a New Japan? Do you see any of those promotions possibly picking her up?
I could, and like I said, it's kind of just for the appearance sake and certain occasional matches, but yeah, I'm just gonna be blunt. WWE is not gonna sign her. AEW is obviously she's not going back to AEW, and that's okay. It's an okay thing. Both women's divisions are strong.
Well, you know something, Jeremy, and again, food for thought here. Do you see, and again, this is my thought, do we see the idea of a Paige, Saraya, however you want to go by identifying her? Do you see her going to Impact Wrestling, much like a Nick Nemeth, to build their women's division? Because we talked about before, they have a working partnership right now for the idea of building their women's division, for an idea of building someone to be of the next level, like a Jordan Grace, or I know there's several other women that are on the roster, pardon me, who very well could be ready to make that next step up. Another one to throw out there too, and this one totally slipped my mind. It was a High Spots question a couple weeks ago. Could it be something where she gets one last possible chance by going to Evolve? I mean, we have seen Timothy Thatcher go to Evolve. Could Paige be the kind of a person that could build someone the likes of a Kylie Ray to build them to be ready for an NXT or for a main roster spot?
Yeah. I mean, possibly. I don't think it's completely out of the equation.
I do agree with you. I don't foresee Paige making a main roster return. I really don't see that. But do I see something that could allow her to build the next generation of professional wrestling? I would really like to see it, because that's one thing when you sit there and look at it. I mean, you look at wrestlers, the likes of Sarah Del wrestler, the likes of Mickey James. You look at wrestlers along those lines. Matter of fact, and it's totally out there. Given the fact that we haven't heard anything in a while, maybe that's something where you see maybe a Becky Lynch. You see wrestlers, especially if you look at a Becky Lynch or a Paige Saraya, you're going to have a completely different style of professional wrestling, because both of those individuals are very accomplished in the European style of wrestling. And to be able to give another avenue. I mean, when you look at NXT, one of the big things that's going on that's a huge benefit for NXT is somebody like the likes of Robbie Brookside. And I know that they've in the past had wrestlers the likes of Johnny Saint who've been able to come over and showcase their abilities and bring that forward to the next generation. I mean, the one thing is time will tell, but right now, who knows how much time it's going to take before we could see Saraya Page, however you know her as, how long before we see her in a potentially in a main promotion or a main roster in the weeks and or months to come. So at this point, let's go ahead and get that randomizer again. We got some more questions here for the viewers of the Wrestle Talk podcast. So let's go ahead and hit that randomizer again. All righty, let's see what our next graphic is going to entail here tonight on the Wrestle Talk podcast. So reminder, hashtag Let's Talk Wrestling, hashtag WTP, hashtag Wrestle Talk podcast. All right, this is the one. Let's go ahead and throw this question up here. This is one has been gnawing at me for about the last 3 days. Let's go ahead and throw the question up here. As you see with the graphic, the WWE is now going to be inducting the match of Bret Hart versus Stone Cold, Steve Austin, as an immortal moment in the WWE Hall of Fame. Do matches belong in the WWE Hall of Fame? And Maestro, I want to go ahead and turn things over to you on this one because I'm going to get on my soapbox here in a few minutes. And, you know, I'm actually going to go ahead and give you an idea here. I'm going to let you have your thought. And then I'm going to change things up a little bit. I'm going to flip the script, if you will. So what are your thoughts about matches belonging in the WWE Hall of Fame? Maestro?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you something. I would agree with it. Okay, this is what I look at. You know, WWE is trying to build a physical Hall of Fame. WWE is trying to acquire all kinds of merchandise and memorabilia from famous feuds, characters, and moments. It's been something they've been doing for years. That is where I do like the tie-in of having for a physical Hall of Fame. So let's put it to you this way. To me, a match in the WWE Hall of Fame is like having a Super Bowl in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You know, where they talk about, let's just say, okay, I'm throwing out an old school one, the 1958 NFL Championship game. Okay, well, then you have Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan. You know, and you could put these examples back and forth. You have artifacts from that game, whereas you can have artifacts from, like, maybe Hulk Hogan's boots or Andre's singlet, things like that. Now, in the case of Bret Hart versus Stone Cold, I think it is one of the greatest matches of all time. I never get tired of watching it. I think it made up for what was pretty lackluster of a WrestleMania. But the way I see it, until there's something physical in the WWE as far as the Hall of Fame goes, I don't think so. I think this is a more of a it should have happened down the line type thing. Because there's going to be, and you know what's going to happen. You've seen it, Luke. You know what I'm going to get at. They already have enough controversy with not having certain wrestlers in the Hall of Fame. Think of all the matches those wrestlers are in that won't be in the Hall of Fame. Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. Owen Hart versus Stone Cold. I'm saying it. Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels versus Triple H at WrestleMania 20. You know, those three just stand out. And to me, like, also, you know, Don Morocco, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, where Snuka dives off the top of the cage. Guess what? A lot of wrestlers were inspired by that moment, but it's not going to be in the Hall of Fame probably because Jimmy Snuka is an accused murderer. So the way I see it, it's a very gray area to include matches. Like, I think it's another gimmick that they're trying to do. They did the legacy wing of the Hall of Fame, and then they've abandoned that. And I feel like they're going to try to do matches, and then they're going to abandon that too. So it's a very slippery slope. I think it's a good idea with potential, but unless there's a physical Hall of Fame artifacts are going to be in, I don't see the point. That's my opinion.
Well, something, Maestro, and we're going to be joined by Wes Rhea, the author of the book Off the Top Rope, here in just about 15 minutes. I already flipped the script here earlier tonight with having the CEO join us in the first hour. This is going to be Luke Roberts turning the Wrestle Talk podcast on its ear again tonight. I want to go ahead, if you would be so kind, whether it's you or our great production team that's backstage, I want you to go ahead and hit the shoot and shout music. Because I got something on my mind here. I think the viewers of the Wrestle Talk podcast need to hear some truth from the one, the only Luke Skywalker Roberts. So let's go ahead and hit that shoot and shout music for tonight.
It's just one of those days when you don't want to wake up. Everything is fun, everybody sucks. You don't really know why, but you want to justify ripping someone's head off. No human contact, and if you interact, your life's on contract. Your best bet's to stay away, motherfucker. It's just one of those days. It's all about the he says, she says bullshit. I think you better quit, let me slip, or you'll be leaving with a fat lip. It's all about the he says,
all right, ladies and gentlemen, you got lots of the shoot and shout music here this second.
It's just one of those.
All right, here's my view. This is Luke Roberts' take, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to creatively borrow tonight. I'm going to steal from the one, the only Big Daddy P. This is Luke Roberts' snippet of truth for tonight. I like what you said, Jeremy, but I want to piggyback on it. The idea of saying that they've given up on things like the Legacy Wing, and they still do the Legacy Wing. And I am very much an advocate for the Legacy Wing, because without a Legacy Wing, you can't truly acknowledge the wrestlers of yesteryear, that you can't find footage about things on YouTube or other avenues of video media, because they realistically don't potentially exist except in the world of VHS or 8mm or things along those lines. Here's my thought. If you're going to put together a moment or the Immortal Moment wing, here's my question. Besides the fact that you're looking at a situation where you could put matches of an individual who potentially may not be in the Hall of Fame. But here's my question. And I mean no disrespect, because the idea of the Hart-Austin match and the double switch and all that kind of stuff, I get it. But how in the world can you name that number one? You can go in there, and you mentioned several of them. Hogan versus Andre. You mentioned the match, the main event of WrestleMania 1. Piper and Orndorff taking on Hogan and Mr. T. You go with the idea of WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. You go out with WrestleMania 3, a match for years that was considered the greatest match in the history of professional wrestling. That being the Dragon Ricky Steamboat taking on Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, some people might say the idea of the first ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. And I know it wasn't the first ladder match. I know that people are going to get all fussy about that. I know there were matches with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels before we saw Ramon and Michaels. Don't even give me that right now. When it comes down to it, number one, who classifies something as what would be considered an immortal event? And how do you go by claiming this as the first one? There are a lot of matches. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of things. You could go back in the idea of talking about the first King of the Ring or the first Royal Rumble, or you could talk about what's going to stop them from putting in WrestleMania 4 and put the entire tournament for the WWF Championship? Or why not the idea? Are they going to put in the idea? Are you going to put in the match where Roman Reigns had to start out as number one and work his way all the way through the Rumble to keep his championship? When it comes down to it, and again, this is not sour grapes. This is one of those where, why don't you give the wrestlers their credit? Why don't you give the wrestlers their due? Matchups, you can get the right combination, but it's like finding the needle in the haystack at times. And to me, I think it's one of those, simply put, when it comes down to it, it's going to be one of those where there are countless wrestlers that belong to have the opportunity, as they say nowadays, as all the cool people say it, it's time for them to get their flowers. But then the question is, what are we going to do? Is it going to be just WWE? Is it going to be WWF? Is it going to be WCW? Is it going to be ECW? Where are the lines? To me right now, and I know this has really been a real big tangent as of late, but when it comes down to it, when you're putting people in, when you're putting a Hall of Fame together, to me, you don't put it in as matches, you don't put in moments, you put in wrestlers who are consistently giving of their time. And there are countless wrestlers who have done just that, who deserve their flowers over putting other people in matches, a one-match deal versus a lifetime of someone's work. That's Luke Skywalker Roberts, and to quote a very well-known manager/announcer from back in the 90s, that's Luke Skywalker Roberts, and there's my opinion. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, it just got in my craw, and I had to talk about it. Maestro, we've got roughly about 10 more minutes till we're going to be joined by our guest this evening. Since we've got the shoot and shout going, I kind of changed it up in midstream. I kind of took a high spots question and turned it into my shoot and shout. What is your thoughts for shoot and shout here tonight? Because I know there are some things on your mind too, my friend.
Okay. I got a good shoot and shout, because this goes, I really wanted to say this to a lot of people, and you really want to shoot? Oh, we will shoot. It'll get me heat. I don't care at this point. I'm almost 30 years old. I know what I want to do in life and who I want to do it with. So I'm going to make this clear to you. I love professional wrestling. I love doing the Wrestle Talk podcast. I love doing I-70 Sports Media. I love doing Roundabout Sports. I love PWE. And to some extent, I enjoy my full-time job at a nursing home. But you know what I love more than any of that? In fact, what I love more than all of that combined, Luke? Being a fucking father, being a boyfriend, being a son, a grandson, being family. And guess what? Sometimes being a family member, sometimes being that dad, that boyfriend, that son, sometimes, just sometimes, that supersedes my jobs. Because I will, until I am 6 feet under, put my family first. And guess what? If there's somebody out there who doesn't like that, tough shit. Because this is actually something that's been on my mind a lot lately. You know, and this goes to, this is a general message. So don't think one person is getting called out on this. This is a general message. First off, if you don't put your family first, how dare you? Because family is the most important thing, along with the good Lord above. Second, it amazes me because guess what? As much as I love doing my best to make money, the money ain't going with me when I'm dead. But I'm damn sure going to see my family up in heaven. Also, yeah, guess what? My daughter just turned 1 a few weeks ago, and it was one of the happiest days I got to see. Like, I remember meeting her when she was 2 months old, just how tiny. And next month, my girlfriend and I will celebrate a year together. You know, my mom's having a birthday coming up and next week. And I know it may seem like I'm going off track on things. But I've really wanted to get a lot of this out because I've gotten a lot of flack from a lot of people about where my priorities lie, about being a dad now all of a sudden. Well, guess what? That's fucking life. And like I said, I love doing this. I was beyond honored to when I realized, I'm like, sweet, I get to be back on my brother Luke tonight. That's awesome. I'm excited. I always love seeing you and talking to you and doing shows and broadcasting and all that with you. But you know what? Sometimes I have to say, hey, I'm not going to be on the whole time. Or, hey, sometimes I'm not going to be able to fulfill this commitment or do this article or be at work this day because my kid's got an appointment or I got another job to worry about. At some point in life, especially when you get to my age, like I said, I'm going to be 30 years old in a couple months. Responsibilities really start to rise. They really start to build up. And sometimes life's a very stressful thing. I'm grateful for the life I have. I'm grateful for the jobs that I do because I wouldn't be doing them if I didn't. And I'm beyond thankful for the family that I have. And for better or worse, they're the only family I got. That includes, you know, my best friends that I've known for 20 years. That includes you. That includes a lot of other people. And at the end of the day, they're the ones who I'm going to always be there for first. But understand that being a father, a son, a boyfriend, a grandson will always supersede anything. And that doesn't make me not a hard worker. And it doesn't make me anything less than anybody else. And if you think so, if you think I'm less of a person because I prioritize family over work, fuck you. That's the maestro's take. And there's that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should get another round of applause for that one. Jeremy Carp making it a point to vent his frustrations today as a part of the Shoot and Shout comment. Two very to the point shoot and shouts, and I do, and it's kind of I want to kind of take a brief another brief side journey here. Usually, in the course of the Wrestle Talk podcast, we would be joined by our good friend Perry Hartman, Big Daddy P, for the Snippets of Truth. We know that Big Daddy P under the weather this evening. I don't believe he's going to be able to join us. I know he's been dealing with some health issues. Also want to take just a moment here and give a shout out. I really haven't told a lot of people, really haven't had a lot of time to talk about it per se. But still kind of taking some time. I had a death in our my wife and I's immediate family. Had to attend a funeral over the past weekend, and like I said, when it comes down to it, make it a point, talk with your family, talk to your friends. You know who you need to lean on, who you need to take care of, because at the end of the day, there are people all around this world that care for you. And you need to make sure that when it comes down to it, I sit there and I look at things. And Jeremy, what you said earlier on really just kind of put things in perspective for me tonight. In the idea that, again, I've been on the road for many a year now in the world of professional wrestling and my business ventures outside of professional wrestling. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes you got to stop and smell the roses. Sometimes you got to take and accept your flowers. And sometimes you just have to sit there and say, you know, I got things to do, but I'm not going to be running from sun up to sundown. It just cannot happen. And I mean, again, I liken it with what Big Daddy P said earlier on. I'm closer to AARP than the start of my careers. And when I look at it and having the opportunity to take time to be with family, to be with friends and enjoy life, it really kind of puts a lot of things into perspective. And, you know, it's kind of ironic, Jeremy, that as we look at things here, and we're going to be joined here momentarily by our guest. I want to go ahead and get that on the way here. But before I do, let's go ahead real quick here. I know we've got the graphics. Can we go ahead this time, instead of having just the ticker run, can we actually have the graphics pop up for our sponsors? Want to make sure that we give them their just due. As we say, give them their flowers for being a part of the Wrestle Talk Podcast family and helping us make sure this podcast goes on each and every week. I want to go ahead and bring those up here on the screen right now. Our proud sponsors are the Retro Zone. You have an opportunity to enjoy those kinds of things. Pain of Stream Productions, one only Big Daddy P, each and every program. The Independent St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. Reminder, June 22nd. For more information, you can log on to their social media to get tickets. $30 in advance, $35 at the door. Interstate 70 Sports Media, where you can catch the maestro Jeremy Karp and Roundabout Sports every Wednesday evening. And Little Popeye Designs, home of those great Wrestle Talk Podcast tumblers, limited edition. If you want to purchase one for $20, make it a point to send us a media message through social media, and we will be more than able to hook you up. And of course, the FWWC, the world's premier fantasy wrestling group. You saw the CEO, Dewan Mills, earlier on. We're going to have Universe Mania 11 coming up here in just a few short days. And all of these great sponsors of the Wrestle Talk Podcast each and every time we have an episode. Now, Jeremy, I'm going to tell you this. One of the things that's always stood out to me when it comes to the Wrestle Talk Podcast is we try our best to get interviews from the best in professional wrestling, whether it's local independent wrestling, whether it's wrestling on the national, international. We are made a point here at the Wrestle Talk Podcast to look at all avenues of professional wrestling. And when we booked tonight's guest for our feature interview, I went back and I looked at some of this man's credentials. And I'm going to tell you, I don't want to give away too much because his story really is very eye-opening. I always think about how, and Jeremy, you said it countless times of how there are people who go above and beyond, and they always give 100%, and they always do their best, and you always see them in a lot of different avenues. I'm going to tell you right now, when we get to take part in this interview here momentarily, this man is a man that I very well wish that I could accomplish some of the things that he has throughout his long-term career. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I want to go ahead and get the intro music queued up here. We want to welcome here to the Wrestle Talk Podcast a man who has created the book, who's written the book Off the Top Rope. And we're going to talk about that here right now with our featured guest this evening. Let's go ahead and hit that intro music for our guest, the one, the only, Wes Rhea. All right. Good evening, Wes. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Luke. Nice to meet you. Maestro Jeremy Karp. Sorry about that, my friend. Nice to meet you both. Thank you so much for those kind words. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys this evening. You guys are doing a great job. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for those kind words.
Well, like I said, we want to thank you for being a part of the program here tonight. And I'm gonna throw this one out here before I throw things over to the maestro to start off our interview. I was doing a little bit of research. I've had an opportunity to see several of your articles. I saw one for a magazine talking about your life outside of the world of pro wrestling, outside of all your many different business ventures. And I'm gonna level with the viewers here. You were born and raised in Marietta, Georgia.
Right.
You're a graduate of Sprayberry High School.
Yep.
I got to ask you, and again, you've been a proud resident of Cobb County. With all of that part of the country and all of the wrestling names that have come from that part of the United States of America, have you had any run-ins with any of the personality? I mean, again, I just run through some names here. People the likes of Ray Traylor, of Marcus Alexander Bagwell. I know that Glacier now calls that area home. The likes of the Woods family spent many a time there. Xavier Woods. I know it's in Gainesville. It's a little bit farther away, but the likes of a AJ Styles. With all those names that our viewers are familiar with, have you ever had any run-ins with their family being in that particular part of the country?
Oh yeah, Luke. Do you mind if I tell you a real quick one on that? You okay with that?
Let's rock and roll here. This is what our viewers are looking forward to. In addition to talking about the book, go ahead, Wes.
Hey, I appreciate that, Luke. Yeah, so I grew up with Mark Bagwell, a Buff, and his brother John. So that's actually kind of how I ended up entering in the world of professional wrestling. I had graduated from college, thank goodness. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but I played baseball in college. Was really kind of hoping to make a career out of that. I was about 6'2", 170 at the time, and as you guys know, that's not going to cut it much in the world of professional wrestling, right? Ran into them. They had entered into the world of professional wrestling. Mark had just gotten started in a local promotion here in the area. His brother John was working as well, and I was like, how do you trying to figure out how to get into this world? And I'm like, I'm only about 170. They're both over 200, and they're like, the TV will add 10 pounds to you. They'll bump you up to 200. Yeah. And I know, you guys may remember some of the 80s wrestling back then, and it was a little different way of getting in as it is maybe today. So, they hooked me up with somebody. You had to do the double secret handshake. And so that's kind of how I got my start getting trained was through John and Mark Bagwell. So yeah, John's my age. We went to high school together at Sprayberry, and Mark was a few years younger. Xavier, as you mentioned, is definitely a little bit younger than me. Definitely ran into AJ Styles many years ago when he was just getting started. Never met Ray though, Ray Traylor. Now Glacier, Ray Lloyd and I are good friends. We started back in the independent days many years ago. We worked together as a tag team. I could tell you some funny stories about him working as a heel under a hood called the Punisher. We had some real fun times with that, traveling around together. But know Ray real well. He was in my wedding. I'm actually going down to his wedding in October. As you met Bob Armstrong, you may remember Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was from here in Marietta as well. So, there's been a few folks somehow come through the Cobb County metro area of Georgia. Diamond Dallas Page calls home here in the area as well. So, I can, I guess, thank Mark and John for getting my body pounded for a few years there.
Well, first of all, I got to give a shout out to Ray. I had an opportunity, episode 260 of the Wrestle Talk Podcast. You can imagine it, 252 episodes ago.
Wow.
There was an event here in the St. Louis area as part of Fighting for Autism. We had an event here, and he was a part of a 6-man tag team match with a group that was called Generation Iron, one of which is the man who wrote our entrance music for the High Spot segment, which we had earlier on this evening, DJ Money. He professionally goes under the ring name of Titan. Brent Banner as well, and they took on, I believe it was the Wind of Destruction, Makazi, and the Arch City Mercenaries here in St. Charles. And I got to ask one question here, and you'll appreciate this. You said you were about 170 when I first started wrestling, and my first match was in 95. So I mean, again, you and I are kind of in that same area. Yeah. My question is this: you said that the camera the Bagwells told you the camera adds 10 pounds.
Yeah.
How do you add about 100 pounds? Because when I first started wrestling, I was about 120. So I know where you're coming from on that. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to my broadcast colleague, the Maestro Jeremy Karp. I know he's got a couple of questions that he wants to ask you in regards to into your time in professional wrestling, your book. There's a lot of different avenues that we want to go. So Maestro, I want to go ahead and turn things over to you.
Thanks for that, Luke.
Okay, so I got a total, this is a random question, but because you're from Marietta, it relates.
Okay.
What was I got? You've been to the Big Chicken, right?
Oh yeah, you can't be from Marietta and not go to the Big Chicken. That's right. That's where all directions go, right? I mean, everybody says go to the Big Chicken, turn left or right. It's not north or south or east or west, right? It's
No, I say that because for a long time, my dad grew up here in St. Louis,
okay.
but there was like a good, close to 10-year period or so where he and my grandparents lived out in Roswell.
Okay.
So
Not far.
not too far from the Chattahoochee. So yeah, it's perfect. So yeah, when we go down to Georgia, and it's always a wonderful time.
Nice.
So as far as the first thing
Yeah.
I have to ask is, now you went to Kennesaw State, right?
I sure did. I did.
Okay. Now, if I remember correctly, did you ever play baseball on while you were there?
I did. I sure did. I played on their very first team, believe it. I'm really dating myself here, guys.
In 1984, correct?
What's that? I'm sorry, what was
1984, correct?
84. Wow, yes, good one. Yeah, I played there. I played there. I actually started off my career in 83 at a local technical school, and then I realized very quickly I was allergic to calculus. And said I better go to right, or anything that ended in a TRY. You just name that. So I ended up first baseball team at Kennesaw State. Yeah, transferred over there and played baseball for a year, and it was
around that
fun.
time. My dad was down in Georgia. Around that time, my dad was down at Georgia State, so he graduated, I think, in '86.
Nice.
So my next, I wanted to ask. So where did this whole transition from baseball to pro wrestling kind of begin? Where did this love for professional wrestling come from?
Yeah, no, great question, my friend. I, probably like all of us as a kid growing up, I loved wrestling. So I go back to the Georgia Championship Wrestling that would come on Superstation 17 at 6:00 on Saturday night, right? I had to make sure I was home for that. Mr. Wrestling 1, 2, Dusty Rhodes, Thunderbolt Patterson, the Armstrongs, you name it, right? So I loved it. I just never was a real big guy. I mean, I was tall, I 6'2", but even when I was in college playing bad, I'm like 145, 50 pounds, right? So I never thought of even, I said, professional baseball, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't get drafted, but I ended up having what they call a free agent tryout, where they invite some folks in with the Cincinnati Reds. Didn't work. I thought, this is, better go get a job now, right? And then that's when I ran into, as I was telling you, running into Mark and John Bagwell, and somehow, when you're 20. I heard you say earlier, Jeremy, you're about to hit 30. You're a young man, my friend.
Yeah, I'll be 30 on June 4th.
Yeah, you're a young man, my friend. So I may be 21 or 2 at the time, somewhere right around there. And, at that time I thought, I can get into professional wrestling. And so I said, this is my chance here. And I got an opportunity, got to go up for what they call a tryout here up in Northwest Georgia in the Rome area. And I have to say, guys, I was very fortunate, because you've probably all heard stories, back then, especially, I'd heard stories of people getting their legs broken and things happening, somebody taking the money and running. And I got very fortunate with a good group. This guy named Gary Gordon and Ray Candy. If you guys remember Ray Candy, the name Ray Candy. And I know they literally just, beat me up for free for about an hour and a half. I thought I was going to go out there and jump off the top rope, do all these cool moves. And literally I was just getting hip toss, body slam, back drops, hitting the ropes. You guys know what that's like. You come out with burn marks all over your back, So, and then after that, the guy was like, hey, kid, that's what they call you when they forget your name, right? Hey, kid, I saw you got some athletic ability. If you can get up to 200 pounds, you'll train you. And I was like, I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, when Jim Carrey says, so you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I needed, that door. And that's kind of how I go. But I had a love for it. I had a love for it growing up. Loved it growing up. Grew up here watching NWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I was just like, this was a childhood dream, I said, I got to go for this. Yeah.
Now you started your career, in the late 80s, and basically you spanned a lot of the Southeast as far as a lot of promotions that you worked for. What was, if in your opinion, what was one of your biggest moments as far as the grand scope of being an active wrestler?
Yeah, great. You got some good questions, Jeremy. Good question, my friend. So I tell you, that very first match, you can't. I mean, I can still see it today. Like, even though I, got beat, which is fine, right? But that was so cool because, I knew that I was like, if I never do this again, I did it. It was just like, wow, I did it finally. And that was a good, you can't top that. I ended up, when I first started, I worked with a guy named Tim Sledge. We were called the Cover Boys. We were a tag team. So you got to remember the time frame, late 80s, early 90s. And kind of the Midnight Rockers, were hot, of course, the Rock and Roll Express, the Fantastics, those guys. And so I was the blonde hair. He had the black hair. And so we were kind of that, kind of midnight rocker sort of look, I guess you could say. But he hadn't been in the business too long. We were working with that promotion with Ray Candy and Gary Gordon, as I mentioned, through the Northwest Georgia, Chattanooga, and that area up through there. And I got very fortunate, guys. I have to say, very, very fortunate in the beginning of my career. As you all know, today's very different. There's the internet. We've got all different ways. Then it was TV. Right. If you weren't on TV, it was really hard to get out. So they had gotten a deal with a local Fox affiliate out of Chattanooga. So it worked out really well for me. And there's an independent promoter down in South Georgia by the name of Ben Masters who ran great shows. And we got to be in a tag team tournament. And it was the gimmick $10,000 to the winner, tag to the winner. But, it was so cool. It was Thunderbolt Patterson, Ron Garvin, Chris Walker, Ray at the time, Ray Lloyd Glacier was working with a guy named R.D. Swain. They were the Blazers. Jimmy Powell, Mike Golden. Let's see, who else was there? The Fantastics, Jack Victory, and Rip Morgan. And we got to work a guy named Rex King and Raven, who at the time was working under a gimmick called Scotty the Body. And we got to work them. And that was so cool because, again, we hadn't been in the business that long. Both Tim and I have kind of about the same time frame. So we hadn't been in the business. It was so cool to get a chance to work with guys like that. So that was super cool. One other one, if you don't mind real quick, Jeremy, is got a chance to be in a Battle Royal, which was so – I don't know if you guys ever been in Battle Royals or chaos, when you're, and so I was working a show, and it was a Junkyard Dog, Brian Clark, who was the Night Stalker at the time, Stan Lane, Ranger Ross, if you guys remember Ranger Ross, and let's see, I think one of the Armstrongs was in there. There's a few others. And Ray at the time he was working under his name, Ray Lloyd at the time. And somehow I got to be one of the final four and it came down. They were basically wanting to start a program with JYD and Brian with Night Stalker. And so Ranger Ross, me, and JYD and Brian were the last four. And I still had been probably about a year in the business, still somewhat green, learning the business. And I was in with all these great guys. And so Ranger and I had to get out and leave Brian and Junkyard Dog still in, right, to do their thing. And I'll never forget, Ranger came up to me and he had me in the corner and he's like, hey, have you ever taken a clothesline over the top rope? Meaning I was going to be against the ropes and flip over. And I hadn't at that time. And Ranger had been in the business a while. And I trusted him. And he said, well, I said, I haven't done it, brother, but, let's do it. And he said, just hang on, just hold on. And I'll have to say, I held on and made it over, and to this day, I still talk to him and I thank him for that because I had full trust in him that, he was going to take care of me because I had never done that before at that time in my career. Right. So those were super cool times, being able to work with that, working with, again, with Scotty and Rex. And then later on in my career, I did get a chance to work a house show with Global Wrestling Federation, if you remember, and it was kind of when they were having some problems. They were about ready to get off TV. Mark had just left to go to WCW. He was working the Handsome Stranger gimmick, and I got to go in and work the Handsome Stranger gimmick a couple times on some house shows for them. And then right at the tail end, probably one of the really cool things was it was a house show for WCW. I was kind of getting out of my kind of about to finish up for the most part. A guy named Alan Funk. I don't know if you know who Alan. Me and Alan teamed up, and there was a show which was super cool. Bill Goldberg was on, the late Chris Benoit, Disco Inferno. I worked Disco a lot throughout my career. Chris Canyon, Ray was working the Glacier gimmick at that time. So that was, and DDP as well was there. So that was really cool too. I mean, we were the opening tag team match, which was cool, so I got to do my thing and then sit back and be a fan for a while. But that was so cool doing that. But yeah, I had some really good times working some really good shows with some great people throughout my career. But that was you can't beat the first one. Yeah.
Something, Jeremy? Jeremy, I want to step in here for a second. Can I just sit here for a second and feel like I'm 5 years old again, Wes? Because when you talk about the names like Ray Candy, a part of the Zambui Express, if I'm not mistaken, you talk about Rex King and Steve Dahl. You talk about Alan Funk, known as Kwee-wee. You talk about the idea of, and again, I'll say this right now, I've always been a huge fan of Raven, but I've also been a huge fan of all of the personas. I mean, again, when you get Scotty the Body, and this may have been pre-Oregon, post-Oregon, but I mean, again, the names are sitting here. I mean, we had an opportunity. And Jeremy, I want to reflect this because you can remember very well. We had an opportunity about 2 years ago to go to the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame up in Iowa and the induction ceremony. And I remember having a moment and Jeremy took the picture of being able to shake hands with Thunderbolt Patterson and Les Thatcher.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And I felt like I was literally 5 years old. And again, to tell you the story real quick.
Yeah.
Looking at 5 years old, I remember it was 6:05 on the East Coast, 5:05 Central, and there a lot of people have heard the story. I had to be on my grandmother. My grandmother had the ugliest orange carpet you could ever imagine, and it was one of those where you had to turn the antenna, you had to turn the rabbit ears just right to be able to watch it. I mean, again, that was the big idea of when you had Ole and Gene and Ole and you had Lars Anderson and you had the Magnum TAs and you had Dusty Rhodes in the early days and you had the likes of the Koloffs and the original Midnight Express, that being Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. I mean, there are so many things. I feel like I'm 5 years old again. And again, this is one of the reasons why we want, and again, we're not anywhere near done, but I want to say thank you because you're getting the opportunity not only for our viewers to know what it is, but even for us being longtime fans to be able to sit back and just, I mean, I'm literally, I just want to jump up and down and squeal because I am just loving the stories. Jeremy, I apologize. I had to chime in there because again, I wanted to make sure that the viewers understood that yes, we've all had those opportunities, and to meet somebody the likes of Thunderbolt Patterson, like you did at the Hall of Fame, definitely one of those things on the bucket list. So, Maestro, back over to you, my friend.
Oh, thanks, Luke.
All right, I gotta ask this, Wes.
Yeah.
Why shows, especially all these years later, why do you choose to live in Cobb County?
I'm from here. I was born and raised in Marietta, Georgia. Parents live here. I traveled around a lot in different places, but never really had any reason to move. The job opportunities were always good here for me. Lots of friends and, family still in the area. Close. I have a lot of family in Tennessee, Chattanooga, which is only hour and a half or so from here, so it's a good part for me. But this, mainly my parents. I'm an only child, so my parents are here, so never really had any much reason to leave. I think probably Tennessee might be the next end up retirement place somewhere down the road. But yeah, that's kind of where it's just been home for me. Probably like most anybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So right. So I want to talk about your book, Off the Top Rope,
Yeah.
from professional wrestling to the corporate world to the classroom. So, what inspired you to write this book?
That's a really, really good question. It's something I'd always wanted to do, is write a book. I really did. I just didn't know on what. I didn't know. I love helping people, and I started teaching at Kennesaw State about a little over 13 years ago. I didn't, and I'm, guys, I'm a cup of coffee from a celebrityism perspective. I'm not super famous. It's hard to even find me on the internet and all that kind of stuff, And somehow one of the professors there, a younger guy, found out that I had been a professional wrestler at one time. And he thought that was just the coolest thing. He loved it. And he's like, you ought to write a book. And I'm like, hey, I'm not that famous. I'm not a Ric Flair or a The Rock or Hulk Hogan or, anybody. And he said, why don't you talk, he said, why don't you talk about how, kind of how you transition? Because part of what I did at the school was I helped students with, their degree and make sure they get the right degree. And then those next steps as they get ready to get out of college and looking for jobs. And I was like, okay, well, maybe you're onto something. So I started thinking about it, reached out to a publisher, and hadn't really done this kind of stuff before, and just got a chance to talk to them and kind of told them my thoughts or what I was thinking about. And they seemed interested. So they said, well, can you put a chapter together? So I wrote a chapter and then sent it to them. I'll just be straight up with you guys. I thought when I sent it, I won't ever hear from them. I've heard a lot about, and like a couple of weeks, they got back to me and said, hey, we like it. We want to publish it. Can you do 10 more chapters? I was like, I think so. So really, Jeremy, it was really about trying to see if I really was hoping that there's something in there that I did along the way that might could help someone else in their journey, to let people know, look, you can do it. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it. Now, it's not always going to be easy, right? And sometimes you got to get to be over 200 pounds before you can be a professional wrestler, and you take some lumps and bumps along the way. But if you have skills, you can take them. I learned, as you guys know, you learn skills in professional wrestling, negotiation, talking in front of people, working with someone. You got to work with people, and then you can learn from that. And I just try to help people through my journey, let people know, hey, if this guy can do it, hey, maybe I can do this too, just to give people some hope and some perseverance and some faith, and just to keep moving forward, with some positivity. So that was really what I was wanting to do, is to help people. So I figure if it helps one person, gosh, maybe I've done done some good from that book. And that was really the goal of it. And I'll tell you too, guys, it took me about a year, a little over, to write that. And I can tell you right now, a Word document does not translate to a book page. And I really thought that book was going to be a lot thicker than what it was. But hey, I really, end of the day, I really wanted to be a short read. I really did. I wanted to be an easy read, something somebody could get on a plane from Atlanta to Orlando and maybe knock it out in a day or two. And I really hope that somebody can get something from it. That was really good.
Man, I don't like flying. B, I would get an audiobook version of this and just listen to it on the drive from Atlanta to Orlando. Now, for those that don't know about your book, how many pages long is your book?
It's about 100, and if you count some of the pictures and some other things, about 140. But that's not all written words. So a lot of there's some pictures and some acknowledgments and things like that. So there's about, I think, 10, 11 chapters, probably about 100, and, probably 10, 12 pages a chapter. It's, again, pretty easy read. I think if you, that's really what I wanted it to be, was an easy read for someone to hopefully get something from it. Yeah. So it's been fun. I've been going around doing some book signings. Had one this past Saturday, going to a Barnes and Noble here locally in the area, and then, try to hit, about doing about one a month, almost kind of like going back to wrestling days, going around. So it's been fun, but Barnes and Noble's been a great partner for me. Been doing those, being in Greenville, South Carolina, and June there, and then a couple here in the metro area next month in May, and then end of the year, Chattanooga, Hamilton Place Mall, go up there. So it's been great. It's been fun. A couple local independent bookstores too as well. So they've been very, very supportive. So it's been fun. So I've been really enjoying it. And then you run up on some people sometimes who'll actually remember you. What was that?
What were you saying, Luke?
No, go ahead, Luke.
I was going to go ahead and jump in here, Jeremy. I mean, again, we're talking about your book. And to give you an idea, folks, Wes has had a story that, I mean, when you sit here and you look at the things that Wes has accomplished and talks about in this book, again, talking about from the idea of getting your degrees. And again, to give you an idea, this man has gotten degrees from Kennesaw State, Troy University, and Taft University. Now, I got to ask you this. You spent many a year in the college world.
Yeah.
Not just as the idea of being a professor, but you've been a student as well. Mm-hmm. And my question is to you is, how does life change after all this education? How does life change your perspective on professional wrestling, or does it change your perspective on professional wrestling?
Great question, Luke. You know, honestly, again, it's a love, right? Professional wrestling. So really the education piece was more for me to help open up doors in the corporate sector, right? And to try to gain the knowledge I needed to hopefully put myself in a position to, go where I wanted to go. And that, from that perspective, I kind of likened it to, again, going back to the early days of professional wrestling when I was 170 pounds, right? I had to start hitting the weights a lot harder, the nutrition, the training. So I kind of applied that to the education, right? To getting my MBA and getting my law degree, but it hasn't changed. I love professional wrestling. I still watch it today. I try to keep up with much as I can when my time permits, but it's just it's been a passion for me, and I love learning. So I love learning. And, I was very fortunate that I had received my undergrad before I started wrestling. So that helped a lot. But, I think it was just taking some of those things that you learn and really just trying to get myself in the best position to succeed in my new chosen profession, right, outside of the wrestling world. And that was really the goal. It was really just like anything. I've been an athlete all my life, so everything I'm been competitive and always try to do my best to get better at whatever sport I was playing, or this was wrestling, or even the corporate sector. I do think that's helped me tremendously because corporate world, it's a team, it's a group project, right? It's a team, right? There's people at your job who you got to figure out a way to get along with. You may not care if you don't see them again until the next day, right? And then there's some people you make lifelong friends with, right? So yeah.
Well, I want to throw this. I want to throw this one out here to you, Wes. I mean, again, you've talked about the idea. You've gotten degrees. You've been in the corporate sector. You've been in the world of education. You've been in the world of professional wrestling. I'm going to ask this question, and we've asked this to several of our guests over the course of 512 episodes. So I figured it's only just we could add this one to your list.
Sure.
When it comes down to things, what would you say to anybody, whether it's starting in the world of education or starting in their careers or starting in pro wrestling, what would you say is the number one piece of advice you would give someone?
I would say try to know where you're going or where you want to go. I don't know if that makes sense. So like if you want to be say a manager or a director, what is it that those people have, he or she has, right, that sets apart from you, right? Is it education? Is it experience? Is it a certification, right? There's a lot of certifications out there now that, you may not have to go back possibly and get, spend 2, 3, 4 years possibly, right? So what is it you're trying to, I think that's where, I think it's, it took me a while to kind of figure out what I wanted to do when I got in the corporate sector. It really did. It took me a little while. And once I figured that out, I said, I do healthcare compliance. That's what I've been doing most of my time. And I said, okay, this is what I need. I need a JD. I need, I want to be at a executive level. And I noticed that, if you go around and look at websites of any companies and you see the leadership, you'll a lot of times see MBA, or, I'm just trying to put myself in a position that if I'm applying for a job or I want to check the box, if that makes sense, right? I want to say, he's got this, 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 and this. And of course, experience, you got to have that. So, it does take some time, but that was really my goal, Luke, was really, I just wanted to, I'd say to anybody, what is it that you want to do? What's your passion? And what can you do to get yourself there, right? What are the things? There's a quote that I love. It says, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse, right? And I think, and I'm not saying, we're not all going to be WWE wrestlers and the world champion, but I would never tell someone if that's a goal or you want to go for it, right? The big thing for me, I'll tell you, Luke and Jeremy, was when I got into professional wrestling, there were times, I'll be quite honest with you, I know you guys will like it. I was getting, you're getting beat up and I'm going, wow, it looks a lot funner on TV. More fun on TV than this. And I think people realize that. But I said to myself, I don't want to be 60 something years old and be going, well, I could have done that. Hey, I could have been, I didn't want to look back and go, hey, as a regret or something, right? I didn't want that. And I'd say that to anybody's trying, whether it's a job, sports, wrestling, acting, whatever just find out what it is you want to do and what can get you up and talk to people, network with people, mentors, people who can help you, who've been there, people like me who did it the hard way, me trying to help you do it a little easier way, right? So I think that'd be the big thing, would be just really try to find out what it is you want to do and what can you do to get yourself there, hopefully with the least resistance.
Very, very true, Wes. Now, like I said, we have Wes Rhea, author of the book Off the Top Rope, here on the Wrestle Talk Podcast. Now, we have just a few more minutes with you, Wes, and I know the Maestro and we heard a little bit earlier on about your history in the greater state of Georgia, and like I said, I feel bad because I'm the odd one out because I wasn't necessarily familiar with the Big Chicken. I've been to Atlanta, I've been to a few other little places in the state of Georgia, but I've never had that opportunity. But can you go ahead real quick and share one or two stories? I mean, again, you've mentioned pretty much a who's who, and as you heard probably earlier on, the Maestro has spent a number of years here in the St. Louis area as a broadcaster. I'm gonna admit mine's nearing 4 decades of being around wrestling.
All right,
Luke
has said he's been in the wrestling business. Hang on. Luke has said he's been in the wrestling business 40 years for about 10 years now.
Hey, leave me alone. Leave me alone, Carp. No, seriously, all kidding aside, I mean, again, I remember when I was a 10-year-old kid and I was running ring robes, and then running ring robes led into getting trained, and then getting trained led to getting in the ring. And you talk about your first match. I remember my first one vividly because I had my first concussion as a result of my first match, not because of taking all the falls in the ring, because my tag team partner decided to run me into a ring post. Yeah. And again, just like you said, with getting dumped over the top rope, you don't know how to do it till you do it. That's about how it is. But like I said, as we're talking about here, can you take just a couple minutes and share one or two stories? Because I mean, again, traveling the roads, there's a difference between when you're in the WWE or in a WCW and you're traveling from town to town, you're getting on planes, you're doing all this. There is something different about being in a car and traveling 200, 300, 400 miles with somebody to get in the ring and compete. Can you share a couple of road stories that won't get you in trouble, that won't incriminate people? Right. Can you give us a story or two?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're so right. That's you think about, traveling around and, getting in the car and driving for hours to, do a show somewhere. And, gosh, let me think of some. Probably one of the more fun times I had was, as I mentioned, Mark Bagwell's brother, John. He worked under a hood called Medieval Man. And John was an excellent worker. And a lot of times we would work each other. And I always loved working with him because first of all, a trust factor, as you all know. And then when I was working with Tim Sledge, we were doing the Cover Boys gimmick, we would work John, and he'd have usually a partner, and we would go out pretty much throughout Northwest Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, those areas. And what was so funny though, guys, was, John he worked under a hood. And so he and I would ride together and we could really talk about our match. We could really get a good, because, as you guys know, back then, a lot of times you wouldn't meet the guy until you got in the ring. They really played, kayfabe big time, baby's face in one and heels in the other. It was back then. It was when I was working back then, like I'm super old here, but it was just like they really heel baby face. There wasn't a lot of the gray like we see today, where somebody's kind of a cool heel or that kind of thing. It was very, very, very very distinction between the two. And so, here we are riding together, and it was so funny. He'd get out of the car, and then, I was a baby face. So a lot of people would recognize me. And guys, as far as I know to this day, nobody ever knew that was him in the car. And then he'd get in, put his hood on, and we would be arch enemies against each other. Right. But it was a great time because it was somebody, again, I knew. And Tim and I became really good friends. We would ride together a lot of times. He lived in Chattanooga though, so sometimes we would have to meet up. But John and I, would travel a lot together. And the fact that we could really, because sometimes in some places you wouldn't ever have a time to really even go over your match much, and you really had to rely on the heel to call most of it, right? And so having that time with him where we could really talk over, and I knew I could try some things I might not try with somebody I didn't really know, right? Especially when you're trying like I think Hurricanrana or a Frankensteiner or something along those lines, or somebody you really trust, and I trusted John. So that was really cool. And the fact, again, that and then would leave, he'd take his hood off and none the wiser, he's back in the car with me, and we're, traveling down the road. So those were good times. I don't know if you guys remember a guy named Mike Golden. Golden, great shows up in the Northwest Georgia area. I always loved working for Mike. He always a great guy. And so we really enjoyed that time, but that was always fun for me, doing that and having that time to be able to really just, take some time to go over your match, and, having that, really helped a lot. Cause it was just, like I said, nobody knew that was him. And Ray Lloyd, when he was working, before he became Glacier, he probably won't kill me if I tell this. He worked, it was so funny, guys. We would work some of the independent scenes together, and he would go under a hood called the Punisher. And, it was just a typical, none of your cool mask you got behind you, Lou, nothing like that. It was your typical black mask. And he, and we would, again, same thing. We would ride together and, really get a good match down. And, he would work that gimmick a while, even sometimes he'd work twice in a night, work under that one night and Ray Lloyd later in the day. It is so funny doing that. So we would, we enjoyed, that was always a good time. Again, working with somebody that you can trust and work with, doing that. So that was always fun. Trying to think if there's anything else there that was, trying to think of another one here that might be of interest to you guys. But those were probably the two biggies that always kind of stood out, was, being able to, work with those guys and, have that time, that camaraderie together, where you can really get try to get a good solid match down while you're doing that. And one other real quick one with, I don't know if you guys, there was a pretty decent promotion here in the late 80s into the early 90s. It's called the North Georgia Wrestling Alliance. And they had a cool format. I don't think they could do that today, but so there was a UPN channel here in the area, and I think it was something else at the time, but it's UPN now. And what they would do is really a cool format. They'd start about 7 or 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, and it'd go to about 1 o'clock in the morning, and they would show like an hour of WCW, an hour of WWE, hour of USWA out of Memphis, sometimes an hour of, it was a group out of Mexico, and then this in the North Georgia Wrestling Alliance. So it was an hour of it. And we would film in the area, and it was the ring. There was these two kind of like beams over the ring, and John he was working the medieval man gimmick. He got this idea, said, hey, what if I throw you in the ropes, and as you come off, I'll throw you up. I'll kind of help boost you up, and you can grab hold of those beams up there and then do a Frankensteiner out of the beams. we practiced it once, and then we did it during a tape, and it worked. Boom. But again, those are things, again, that it would have been tough to do with someone you didn't really know, or maybe had a chance to really work with. But those again were good times, doing that, and again, that was fun.
Well, Wes, I have one more question here, and this is one that we really haven't had an opportunity to ask too many people here. But I want to being a fellow wrestler, you always have that thing in the mindset, what would happen? And it's kind of like that one match that you always wanted to have, but you never did. I'll tell you mine, true statement. It was back, I might have been 2-3 years as an in-ring competitor. And the two men I modeled my wrestling style after, one was the late Ray the Crippler Stevens, and the other was Handsome Harley Race. And I always wished that Harley Race would have been one of those that I could have had a chance to get in the ring with, just because of how the stories I had heard. And having an opportunity to talk with him in a locker room back in '97. I will say this. Would I still want to have the match? Most definitely. Could I have kept up? There's no way in the world, because that man was double tough in every stretch of the word. And again, is there anybody in the wrestling industry? I mean, you've had an opportunity to see kind of a who's who in the Southeast. Is there anybody in your time in professional wrestling that you would have ever wanted to compete against?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Luke. And I think I'll tell you a couple of guys that I really, when I was coming up, I really liked Brian Pillman's game. I really had a chance to meet him a time or two. He would have been someone that had been super cool to have worked. I really liked his style. I kind of liked, what the moves he was doing at the time. So that was cool. I'll tell you another guy that really was Kerry Von Erich. I mean, Kerry Von Erich was another one that just like, wow, that guy was just, to me, had it all. Very sad ending and all, of course, but I thought he had it all. But I would have loved to, worked. Someone. I think Sean and Marty would have been cool to have worked with. Because I was working tag team at the time, and I know they were mainly baby faces, but I think they would have been super cool to work with. The Midnight Express. I had a chance to work a show with Stan Lane. Not Dennis was not with him at the time, or any or I think Bobby, or I can remember Bobby or Dennis was with that time with Stan. But that would have the Midnight Express would have been cool. And I can just tell you, if you don't mind, one quick one, from a regret perspective. I say regret, and I kind of say it with a little dose of sugar on it, I guess you could say. It wasn't a big time regret, but early on in our career, me and Tim, like I said, we're working the Cover Boys gimmick, kind of a midnight rocker-ish sort of gimmick. And my cousin lived in the Nashville area, and USWA was pretty big at the time in that area. And he took, this really getting dating myself big time, a VHS tape, right? So that's what you had to take. Yeah. And he dropped it off to somebody there at USWA and gave him my number, and they called. And I'll be honest with you, at first I thought it was somebody ribbing me. I really did. I thought, that's somebody. But then I called the number, and it was USWA office, and talked to Jerry Jarrett. And he liked the tape and wanted me and Tim to come up and work. I don't know if you guys remember a team called the Rock and Roll RPMs. I think it was Mike Davis and maybe Tommy Lane, I believe, at the time. And we were still being relatively new, and Tim had a job. I was doing something. It was, and I remember Jerry Jarrett saying, and at that time, what was so cool was a lot of guys were making the jump, from USWA to either WCW or, something like, or maybe even WWE, but at least WCW. And we couldn't. And I remember Jerry Jarrett, he was super nice man. He said, look, guys, because I was thinking first, hey, this will be cool. We'll just go up and do a TV taping in Memphis, that'll be cool. But he was wanting us to work run the loop. Because again, back then it's TV, right? If you're on TV, people see you, right? And so he was like, well, no, you can't just come up and do a TV tape. You're gonna run the loop, which was Evansville, Louisville, Nashville, Memphis, that whole area. And we just couldn't make it work. And he was like, hey guys, if you can't, he knew, he said, have you got to quit a job or something, think that over and all. He was super nice, which I thought was cool about that. And so long story short, we ended up not being able to go up there, but I have to say, sometimes it hits me every now and then going, man, what if we would have made that jump, could something have happened? You never know, right? But that was one of those kind of things like, that would have been cool. That would have been cool just to see if it would have, maybe something would have come out of that.
Well, Wes, I'm gonna take 1 second here as I go in here into the Luke Roberts vault, and bear with me here a second as I go back through things here. I happen to pull out of here. You talked about VHS. This actually is one of the VHS tapes of one of my very early matches in my career. And like you said, that was the way it was back in the day. Yeah. It was the idea of where if you didn't have that tape, if you didn't have that cool little 10, 12-minute highlight package to be able to put out there, you didn't get anywhere. And again, another name you bring up, the Rock and Roll RPMs, longtime mainstays in the AWA as well as USWA. Again, another great team that we talk about here. Before we let you go, we do want to take a minute here. For those that want to pick up your book, I know it's available on Amazon. Are there any other places that they can pick up Off the Top Rope if they would like to purchase it?
Yeah, thank you, Luke, so much. I really appreciate that. And did you mention Amazon? It's on Amazon. I think it's actually on sale right now on Amazon, so a good time to get it. Barnes & Noble, of course, barnesandnoble.com, and most of the local Barnes & Nobles here in Georgia carry it. If it's outside of Georgia, they hit or miss. They could definitely order it for you. Books A Million, and several independent bookstores here in the Atlanta area. I have to give, if you don't mind, if I give a couple names, the Book Exchange and the Crazy Book Lady. They're carrying it here locally in the area. That's a good gimmick, isn't it? Crazy Book Lady. That's a good name. Yeah. But yeah, your major retailers are carrying it. Walmart, online, most anybody you can get it through. But again, good price right now on Amazon though. I got the forward from DDP, which helped a lot. Great guy. He helped me. Great pitch. Thank you guys for that pick. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, we want to officially welcome the newest member of the Wrestle Talk Podcast family, the one, the only Wes Rhea. Ray, you are now officially 100% guaranteed a card-carrying member of the Wrestle Talk Podcast family. And I got to tell you right now, I am definitely looking forward to somewhere down the road having an opportunity to sit down and chat with you some more, not only talking about Off the Top Rope, but talking about life in general. We want to say thank you for coming on the program here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you real soon right here again on the Wrestle Talk Podcast.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeremy. You guys have been great. Enjoy the show. You guys are doing a good job. Thanks again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Wes Rhea here on the Wrestle Talk Podcast this evening here. Jeremy, I got to tell you, episode 512 is pretty much in the books. Any final thoughts here tonight?
This has been a fantastic episode. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for Wes, the Night Owl. It's always a blessing to be a part of this. This was special. I know my camera probably crapped out on me a little bit, but no, damn, we're at episode 512 already. That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want me to wrap it up like I usually do, or if you want to say it.
Well, you know something, Jeremy. Tell you what. Again, want to go ahead. We're not going to be able to throw up the graphics, but I want to go ahead and thank all of our great sponsors: Retro Zone, Painter's Dream Productions, Interstate 70 Sports Media, the FWWC, Little Popeye Designs, some of those great Wrestle Talk podcast tumblers. For more information, you can get those online by checking out the Wrestle Talk podcast on social media. Also, the Independent St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame on Sunday, June 22nd. For ticket information, you can log on to their Facebook account. You can get that information. And Maestro, I'm going to tell you right now, it's been a great show. I look forward to seeing you again real soon. But before we go, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you to wrap up episode 512 of the Wrestle Talk podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, we end the show by putting up the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And for that, you dial 988. The line is open 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years. Understand that you're never alone in this world. There is always somebody who loves you, who cares about you, who wants nothing but the best for you. We all go through struggles, trials, tribulations. You know, life can be tough. Your struggles are valid. Your feelings are valid. And understand that in tough times, you're always just a phone call or a text message or an appointment away from what could be that life-saving moment for you. And you could also be the listening ears and watchful eyes for somebody else in need as well. I especially once again want to thank the Night Owl, Skywalker Luke Roberts, Hardcore Hoss himself for all the amazing backstage work he's done, and the rest of the amazing Wrestle Talk podcast family for 512 episodes of awesomeness. And until episode 513, this is the Maestro Jeremy Karp signing off and reminding you that life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading. Good night, everybody.